Good morning and welcome to the September 29th meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. If I could have a motion to approve the public agenda, please. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the minutes from the August 27th meeting. Motion for that, please. Councillor Young, any discussion on the minutes? Any criticisms of the minutes?
They're always perfect.
They are. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. So we have three reports this morning, and the first one is on the warrant strategy, the mid-year analysis. Chief, you want to start us on that conversation?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and good morning to our board. Jeff, I'll get you to step up to the podium there. We do twice a year, we give you a report on our warrant strategy. This is something that was developed a number of years ago in an effort to try and deal with that ever mounting and increasing number of warrants in our city. It's kind of like leaves on your front lawn. You can go and rake them today. Tomorrow there's going to be more there, but if you don't rake them today, there'll be twice as many tomorrow. That's kind of how our warrants work in the city. There's a lot of warrants that are produced. A lot of them are produced out of the courts. People fail to attend court and those types of things. And so we had to develop a strategy. And like I say, this was done years ago. It's working quite well. And as you'll see by the report this morning, we're able to continually make a dent in the number of warrants that are in our city and our ability to execute them. So I'll turn it over now to Inspector Jeff Wagner, and he'll walk you through this report.
Great. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Okay. Good morning, Your Worship, members of the board, Councillor Young. I'm going to provide you with the executive summary regarding the mid-year analysis of our warrant strategy. The vision of the Regina Police Service is working together to keep Regina safe. To help realize this vision, warrant strategy is in place to address current outstanding warrants and any future warrants that the Regina Police Service may receive. One of our goals of our strategic plan is to enhance community safety through effective policing. So the number of warrants added and removed is a performance indicator of this goal. The Regina Police Service, as the Chief had mentioned, we've had a warrant strategy in place for many years. The objective of this strategy is to reduce the number of outstanding warrants and wanted offenders living in our community. The strategy is as follows. As part of our tactical coordination strategy, strategic services section and the district staff sergeants and investigative service division identify the most wanted offenders each week. And then these offenders are selected based on the seriousness of the offense, number of outstanding warrants and known residency in the city of Regina. Calls for service are then generated to proactively locate and arrest these wanted offenders. When resources permit, officers who are on our light duties, assigned to our light duties, they conduct callbacks for wanted people, wanted subjects in the traffic that are wanted for the Traffic Safety Act, city bylaw, and provincial statute categories with information regarding the status of their warrant and then solutions on how they can deal with that. Another strategy is warrants issued for offenses such as break and enter, robbery, theft of auto. They're sent to specific sections assigned to our investigative service division for follow-up. And then warrants which are over 5 years old and not classified basically as serious, that don't involve personal injury offenses, they're deemed as historical warrants. These warrants are sent over to the Crown to be evaluated and withdrawn if they deem appropriate. Outstanding warrants for persons believed to be residing outside of Regina or the Saskatchewan or the province of Saskatchewan have also been separated from the pile, so to speak, from outstanding arrest warrants for people that are wanted in the city of Regina. And then investigating officers, the investigative process following the request for a warrant has been streamlined to have the originating investigator try and locate and arrest those offenders that they've sought warrants for. So the mid-year analysis from January 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2020 revealed the following. On January 1st, 2020, there were 3,255 people wanted on 4,246 outstanding warrants. And then as of June 30th, 2020, those numbers dropped to 2,466 people wanted on 3,220 outstanding warrants. So this represents a 24.16% decrease in the number of outstanding warrants and also a 24.24% decrease in the amount of wanted offenders. As of June 30th, 2020, those people wanted on criminal code warrants, 58% are currently believed to have no fixed address. have moved out of the province or live outside the city of Regina. Additional 4% of those are classified as historical and are due for Crown review. And only 38% of people currently wanted on criminal code warrants have a known residency in the city of Regina. And then that's a little bit different from our bylaw. Conversely, 98% of people wanted on provincial statutes and city bylaw warrants have known addresses in the city of Regina. So going forward, the Regina Police Service will continue to evaluate our warrant strategy, in particular the tactical coordination approach, which focuses again on enforcement efforts on offenders based on the seriousness of the offense, the number of outstanding warrants, and a known confirmed residency in the city of Regina. The Regina Police Service will continue to look for innovative ways to reduce the number of warrants offenders in our community that we have and achieve our goal of enhancing community safety through effective policing. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Good, thank you very much for the presentation. I'd ask members of the commission if they had questions or comments. Councillor Young?
Okay, thank you. A drop of 24.16% is very good, noteworthy. But as you say, the leaves keep coming back on the lawn. So how much of staff time does this take? Do you have any idea of how many hours or how many people are involved in this work?
No, it's an ongoing process from different divisions, so it'd be hard to calculate, but it's an ever-going thing. And even when we're not signing warrants for people to look at, our officers are constantly interacting with the public and checking them on warrants and such.
Okay.
Part of the reason for the decrease, I think, is the Saskatchewan Provincial Court, they basically stayed close to 1,000 charges in relation to COVID. And then, and caution letters. So they dealt with a good portion of those warrants, or those charges that could have been transferred to be warrants later on. And then also the Ministry of Corrections and Policing, they had a decrease of warrant requests for breach-related charges as a result of COVID. So
Okay.
I'd like to say the numbers are going to stay that way, but we'll see what happens.
Well, after COVID, it could go up, you're saying?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So this is doing work for the court system. Do we get any compensation for that, or is that just part of the regular grant that might come from the provincial government?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that it is part of the duties and expectations of a police service to execute any warrants in the community. This strategy strives to, first of all, identify the most serious ones and disseminate that work over a large body of individuals, our patrol officers, and even some of our frontline engagement that Inspector Wagner talked about. And then work with, as Jeff talked about, prosecutors, for example, to re-examine those that might have a stale date on them and it's been quite a long time. So
Yeah.
there's ways that we're asking our partners to help us through this. And I think that's the best we can expect on that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Murray?
You had mentioned when we send them back to the Crown for review. I'm just wondering for how long does it usually take till we get a reply back on whether it's been dismissed or stayed?
I don't have a exact timeline, but they're reviewed, and if they deem them to be important involving serious crime and such, then they'll keep them on the system. But if they're I don't know what the criteria is that they would evaluate it on, but it's a daily thing that happens with prosecutors. So
Okay, is it helpful just to lower the workload if those reviews get done quicker, or is it one of those things where once you've dealt with it, you've dealt with it?
Maybe I'll just answer that. I think the responsibility / burden of all of the warrants that are in our city, they're ever present. So the fact that we have 3,400 present warrants in our city, that exists. And so we're working to try and chip away at that, take the most serious ones off. And if we send a list of, let's say, 50 warrants that we want the prosecution team to review, if they could get it back to us within a week, that would be great. If it takes a month and a half, those warrants are still remaining on the system. And all we're asking them to do is, these are ones that we've identified that have been quite a lengthy piece of time, and maybe there's a few other factors, including we don't know an address for this individual, we don't believe they live in the city, those types of things. And is it in the public interest to still try and execute this warrant? So it would be nice if we could get it back right away, but I mean, that's a big piece of work, and we know we can't boil the ocean on this issue. We just have to be able to work at it and try and prioritize as best we can.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Mr. Pankratz, any questions? Just a couple. This report goes on the website.
Yes.
And how do we compare to other police services in terms of how we're going through this? Do we have any sort of comparative analysis at all?
I don't know the answer to that, Your Worship. We can make some attempts to see. I think the notion of a warrant strategy is present in some other cities, not all, but some. But in terms of the number of warrants, probably would be best to compare it to Saskatoon, for example.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Just
Yeah.
thought if there was, this is a significant drop, and it's partly because of COVID that would explain it. But I know in seeing reports in the past, we're seeing a progression downwards all the time, which is very positive, of course. So I'm just wondering just how we stand compared to other jurisdictions.
Yeah. If you're comfortable with it, Your Worship, what I would propose is that we include that information in our next report.
Yeah.
So we do this report twice a year. We'll add what we can gather for comparative data in
Sure.
that.
That'd be good. Good. Thank you. If there's no other questions, if I could have a motion to receive and file. Councilor Murray, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Good. The Employment Equity Report for 2019.
Great, thank you very much, Your Worship. I've got Ms. Sandra Burrows here, our Manager of Human Resources, who will be presenting this. As you know, this is an annual report that we bring to the public session of the Regina Board of Police Commissioners. This report identifies what our targets are in terms of hiring practices and some of the innovative ways that we're working to try and keep those numbers up to our targets and increase in some areas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Burrows and she can walk us through this report.
Great, thanks, Chief. Your Worship and distinguished board members, thanks for allowing me to present this report today. Of course, Regina Police Service is committed to a workplace and recruiting and employment practices that provide equal opportunity to everyone. As you know, the Saskatchewan Human Rights Commission develops and provides employers with employment targets for the 4 equity groups, which include visible minorities, Indigenous persons, people with disability, and women in underrepresented occupations. As you can see from page 1 of the report, the SHRC significantly increased its targets for people with disability and visible minorities for the Regina area, given our census data on those groups. Table 2 of the report starts out with our 2019 employment equity statistics. While we're not meeting the SHRC targets, we have made some gains. In terms of our year-to-year comparison, we've slightly increased our women in underrepresented occupations and slightly decreased our representation in the remaining 3 categories. Many factors affect our ability to successfully recruit and retain diversity candidates or employees, including but not limited to the nature of the jobs, employment conditions like shift work and term positions or casual positions, and of course the economic and job market conditions. Looking at more detail in each category, starting with female employees, you'll note that the number of employees in Regina RPS is down slightly from 2018, but the number of women in underrepresented occupations is up slightly to 25.2% compared to 24.8% in the previous year. In 2019, the total number of officers hired was 10, and 4 of which were female. Indigenous recruiting continues to be a priority in 2019. Of the 10 sworn members we hired, 2 were Indigenous. Unfortunately, we lost 1 Indigenous sworn officer through retirement and a casual person through resignation. So although our number of Indigenous employees remains at 51, the overall representation is only at 8.1%. Typically, the number of employees with disabilities fluctuates over time, given workplace accommodations are included in those numbers. So the number of employees with disabilities is down slightly to 46 people at 77.3% of employees. The number of employees identifying as visual minorities has remained steady for the last 3 years. However, you'll see from the bar chart on page 5 of the report that the progress we've made in the last 9 years has been substantial, noting that 13.7% of permanent civilian employees identify as visual minorities. In terms of our initiatives, diversity is a priority for Regina Police Service. Human Resources employs an Indigenous recruiting officer, a sergeant in charge of sworn recruiting, and 2 HR civilian consultants whose primary focus is on civilian recruiting. We continue to develop and improve practices and initiatives to enhance our diversity recruiting and advance our retention objectives. We will continue to implement diversity-focused recruiting initiatives such as information nights, diversity POPAT training, additional information on our written exam, the SIGMA, refreshing our marketing material and website redesign, and making attempts to provide clear information that would assist candidates to work through the recruiting process, ensuring their success. Additionally, we hope to work with the City of Regina to partner on a recruiting software that would allow for voluntary declaration with each application. We were approved earlier for a scholarship program to be used to enhance relationships with diversity students interested in working at RPS. We've also had funding for our mentorship and summer student program, enabling us to attract and retain candidates. We'll continue to work to enhance and form partnerships with the education institutes, community equity groups, and other employers who target equity candidates as well. Finally, we will ensure that our continued commitment to the calls to action from the TRC and the MMIWG reports. We'll improve intercultural competency and inspire accountability with managers and employees within RPS. RPS continues to support, foster, and promote respect for individual rights, freedoms, and multicultural diversity within our community and within our workplace. We continue to strive to be reflective of the community we serve. And that concludes the report.
Good, thank you very much. Any questions? Commissioner Pankratz, go ahead.
The stats that you've provided us, I'm assuming are the RPS as a whole. And I'm really curious how the picture would look if we looked at sworn peace officers versus the remainder, if we separated the organization that way. Have you any concept of what that might look like?
I haven't done it in the report, although it would be possible to take the 400 officers and identify what equity group they come from. Of course, women are included in that. Sworn positions for women is considered a underrepresented occupation, so we could do that, but we haven't reported on visible minorities.
Okay, where I'm sort of driving at, and you mentioned it earlier in your report, is in certain aspects of the organization, I would assume that you're short of applicants. And that's the issue,
yes.
Not the fact that you aren't able to fulfill these quotas. Yeah. But if you don't have people applying for a certain job, it's out of your hands. And that's why I was wondering about the distinction between the sworn peace officers versus the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Commissioner. And as you'll notice in the report, like for example, the 2019 Indigenous Workforce Analysis, it does break down on the police side. So the sworn police officer side, we're at 9.4%. On the permanent civilian with our Indigenous workforce, we're at 5.5%, and then our non-permanents there, and averages out to 8.1. So there is a little bit of a breakdown there, but I think that really comes down to recruiting. And recruiting is, I think, more of a verb today than it's ever been before. We understand as a police service, whether it's sworn police officers or civilian police personnel, you can't sit back and wait for someone to knock on your door. And there is a lot of work. Sandra mentioned we have 2 HR consultants that do work not just in recruiting, but working with other recruiters, SaskPower, SaskTel, reaching out to other agencies and understanding some of the challenges that are out there. And just because someone doesn't fit at SaskPower, they might be a good fit for us in our accounting area or vice versa. And so there is a lot of that work. When you hear our HR team talking more and more, recruiting is becoming an everyday activity to try and attract people and to come and work in our organization, and while doing that, making sure that those people that are being attracted are representative of our city and the diversity that we have.
Thank you.
You, Councillor Young.
So I'm looking at 2 things that I'm wondering you use for recruiting purposes, or that could change the views of maybe young women thinking about going into police work. And the first is the student program at Scott that you're taking part in. Is it almost all young men or boys, or are there any girls enrolled?
Yeah, it's refreshing to say that it is a very good mixture. It's not just young men. It is young men and women that are in high school. Of course, this year, as you know, is our first year. It's only been offered to grade 9 students, but we were able to put a class together, so there was enough interest. The other important thing to note is they aren't all from one area of the city. It is attracting students from other parts of the city to come to Scott Collegiate for this specific class. And although we're only a couple of weeks into the school year, the reports have been really, really positive in terms of how it's being received. And I think it's already garnering some attention from other students, and we'll be able to see that enrollment increase over the next year or 2.
So that's a good spot to be looking for young women, for instance, who might want to go into police work, not just the civilian side.
Right. I think that's the whole thinking behind it, is you're not only going to develop students who get the required education they need, but you're building young leaders with a bit of an understanding and focus on policing and community safety. And even if they don't choose policing, that can't help but that can't be nothing but positive for our community. But we are hopeful that it will benefit us in terms of recruiting for sure.
Okay, and then the other one was school resource officers. I don't even know if they're on duty now with COVID.
Yes, they are. Yeah,
okay.
they are.
Have you ever thought of having an event or something that's part of their job is to speak to young women in high schools and talk about the Scott program, but also talk about and bring women police officers to talk to them?
Yeah, that is some of the work that we do, and I think if I remember correctly, when it's been a few months, but when Sergeant Reevely spoke about that, we talked about the police academy that we offered to high school students, where they come into our police service and they spend a day kind of getting presentations from different areas, and they get a bit of an exposure to what the police service looks like. But I think you're right. It's an astute comment to know that having police officers in the schools building relationships is a really good recruiting tool. In fact, you look at most police officers that are from the city of Regina, that are current police officers, they'll be able to tell you very quickly who their school resource officers were, because that connection is oftentimes their entry into their interest in policing. And so it is something that we work on and look for ways that we can do it. We've had leadership groups, we've had more specialized education sessions for high school students as well, and even in some cases even into the elementary schools, talking about what we do and kind of promoting that work. So we're always looking for new and innovative ways to use our school resource officers, and it's nice when we can use them in a proactive fashion. As we've reported to you before, our school resource officers more and more are being brought into situations where they're investigating something that involves a lockdown of a school or securing the building while a threat outside the school is being dealt with. So it's nice when we can be proactive and helping students see the positive side of policing.
So how many of the school resource officers are women?
Orly, you know?
I'd say close to half. Like this.
Okay, good.
It's good.
Good,
It's good.
okay. And then the other thing is you've been having conversations with Black Lives Matter leaders, and you also have conversations with elders, with Indigenous elders. So are those two places where you can speak about that?
Yeah, those are both really good examples of conversations that we're having. In fact, a meeting was held just last week. Deputy Chief Dean Ray, Ms. Sandra Burrows, and Superintendent Laura Lee Davies were present for another meeting with Black in Sask, and that's our representatives from our Black community. And I think it was to me one of the positive things that came out of our first and then our subsequent meeting was there was a real desire to see themselves in our police service. They were wanting us to focus on recruiting and finding ways to, in using their terms, they wanted to see more Black community members wearing a police uniform or working within the police service. We have a young officer right now in police college who's born and raised in Uganda and is going through the Saskatchewan Police College right now and will be a police officer with our police service. And so I think it's important to know that we have to find ways to do outreach. There's an appetite in the community for us to bring different diverse communities into our police service, and in doing so, that increases the likelihood of further recruiting to happen. Having an officer who's wearing the uniform, graduated from police college, and able to talk with other friends and colleagues of his in the community who are from the Black community only helps us when it comes to further recruiting efforts. So that is a big part of the discussion we had, and I think it was a real positive thing that in our meeting with the Black community, and I don't want to get off topic, but it wasn't around frustrations with police brutality and accountability. It was things like we want to be more engaged in dialogue to help develop policy, and we would like to see more of our community recruited and working in your police service. Well, that's a pretty positive thing.
Right, and then just one last comment. We're bringing a report to council tomorrow about expanding this board so that we can also maybe have a little more diversity on the board, because we'll have more members that we can choose and that council can put forward. So I think that's an important part of this as well.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I just want to comment on the Black Lives Matter and the Black Sask movement to supplement this. I've been speaking with members of that community over the past week, and the reaction is really positive of the second meeting, the chief, that you had with them, that what they asked for, they received comments on support for. So there's a real deep-seated support for the police service. This is really an important initiative. I can't overstate that. I know it's a bit off topic, but it is ultimately about having perhaps some Black candidates become police officers, or in a career. But the initiative, the first meeting was good. I was at that one. It wasn't at the second one. I'm very excited about what took place in the second meeting, so I think you need to know that.
That's good. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions on or comments on the report? Motion to receive and file, please. Commissioner Pankratz. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we're into monthly crime stats. Chief.
Thank you, Your Worship. So you've got the crime stat report in front of you. Again, we're seeing some positive downward trending when it comes to our crime stats, and I'll start with crimes against property. We're now seeing a year-to-date decrease of 36.1%. If you break that down, our theft unders is down, they're down 42.6%. I've mentioned before that would include things like shoplifting. So when you look at year-to-date stats and knowing that businesses were closed for a chunk of time, it stands to reason that those numbers would be down. Our mischiefs, though, are down as well, and I think that's a positive thing. If we look at, we're down almost 25% in terms of mischiefs. mischiefs tend to happen when people have idle time on their hands, and I feel like we've had a community with a lot of idle time this year. The benefit, though, we also had officers that we were able to redeploy. We had a larger number of officers on the street doing proactive work, and having that mischief number down by 24.4% is really a positive one. And our theft of auto rates are now they're 50.8% down from where they were at this point last year. So that's a significant and positive decrease. Our crimes against the person, that decrease continues for us as well. We're 4.3% down from where we were compared to last year. And I always like to draw in this category the attention to the actual number, which is 89 incidents. So that's 89 less victims of a crime, of what usually is a serious crime against person, assault, sexual assault, robberies, attempt murders, those types of calls. So having a decrease in that category, albeit only 4.3%, let's not lose sight of the fact that's significant. So overall, the Regina Police Service is down when you put the categories together, 31% in terms of a decrease. And I think I'll leave my comments there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Young, you first.
Oh, I
You?
didn't turn
Okay,
mine on.
you did, okay. Okay, Councillor Murray.
Just an overall question about young offenses. I've got a few friends who are teachers, and the last 6 months, kids haven't been in school at all. And now that they're back in, they're having trouble with a lot of the kids that maybe didn't have the same supportive home life. And they're dealing with some even forms of criminal elements in the school. So I'm just looking for just a response from school resource on the experience of kids coming back after such a long break, and if there's been any sort of young offense increases that we've seen at all.
Try to answer that. I'm not sure we've seen a great increase in the numbers of young people in our community committing offenses. In fact, it's been quite the opposite for the most part. One of the things with the schools, and we'll talk about that later, is we tend to see when schools come back an increase in sexual assault allegations coming forward through our Children's Justice Center, and we're seeing some of that. But as far as young people out committing offenses in the community, we don't believe they were, or at least they haven't been reported to us. So that has definitely been quieter with COVID and schools being shut down. So
It's just anecdotal, so that's great to have the data. So thank you.
Any other questions? Motion to receive and file this report, please. Councillor Young? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And a motion for private session. Okay. Councillor Murray, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Good. Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm.